There's no more place more fascinating in Albany than Albany Rural Cemetery.
At one time, Albany Rural Cemetery was a popular destination, and not just to commune with the dearly departed. It also served as a welcome escape from a bustling industrial city, highlighted by the magnificently carved marble and granite sculptures, erected as fashionable monuments to both the achievements and the stature of the deceased.
Part of the rural cemetery movement it was not just a cemetery but a park, and families would come to their family plots and spend the afternoon. And they would garden, they would plant ornamental trees, exotic trees, they would plant flowers. They would spend the afternoon, have a picnic, they would go on the tour, an 8-mile tour of the cemetery over the bridges and through the ravines. It was probably what, in my youth we thought of as like a Thatcher Park type of day outing, was right here in Albany Rural.
For cemetery trustee Michael Radlick and his wife Lynn, the cemetery is a place of constant discovery.
Just where can you go? We're so close to downtown Albany where you can be, it's quiet and peaceful. And
the beauty of some of the Victorian monuments. There's always something new to see.
Yeah, we'll go, one thing we do periodically is instead of, because we have our regular route, this is part of the periphery, but we'll say, let's go backwards on the route. And you go backwards and suddenly you start
sometimes.
suddenly start seeing different, where, I never saw that,
There's
stone.
This pink granite monument
up on
on South Ridge.
Yeah, and I never saw that before. It's sort of hidden off the corner, and we come around the other way, you never see it.
Did the rural cemetery movement's concept of a graveyard park have any influence on future city designers?
The rural cemetery movement was very influential on the open space and city parks movement that started with really Central Park in New York City in the 1850s. Andrew Jackson Downing, Hempstead, and Charles Vaux, they were highly influenced by the rural cemetery movement. And I remember reading a quote from Andrew Jackson Downing talking about the throngs of people going to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn on a nice day and a weekend to just walk and picnic and recreate, and how the city needed that kind of open space for breathing and relaxation right in Manhattan, and it led to the development of Central Park. And Washington Park occurred a little later in the 1860s, but it was the same kind of a concept to have that a similar setting like the rural cemetery movement, right? But to have that park setting right in the city, right in the urban area.
And what a wonderful park it made! But the sound of rustling leaves and tranquil streams made for more than just a lullaby for resting spirits. It also sang out to the moral values of Victorian age, an age forged in the arms of an industrial revolution, and for some, a time when great fortunes were to be made. Fortunes worthy of grand monuments, fortunes that would transform the cemetery into a gallery for the ages.
This was a brief moment when death was kind of on the social agenda of sentiment and moralism. Now, it's like a dirty little secret that we don't really talk about. There's all this evasion of death in the modern world. And before, the Puritans of New England didn't really care what happened to the body. It was a moment when death and sentiment and morality were really on the middle class consciousness.
Just look at the structure of these mausoleums, these large granite blocks, and look at the Root mausoleum next door. Enormous granite blocks, built for the ages, obviously.
Do you think they achieved their goals, though? If I went to Albany schools today and asked fifth graders who Erastus Corning or John Boyd Thatcher...
Wouldn't have the slightest notion.
So it's kind of fleeting, right?
Well, it all depends to whom you're speaking. Yeah, you wouldn't expect fifth graders to know necessarily about John Boyd Thatcher. Well, they might know about Thatcher Park. They might make that connection. But if you're talking to local historians or people who are attuned to such matters, they know right away to whom you're referring. that's the great thing about Albany Rural Cemetery. It's one of the great places in the Albany area for history, biography, and art. But for historians, it's the promised land. There's no more beautiful time of day here than now. Raking light.
In its present form, Albany Rural is an open page in Albany's history books. From the last patroon to industrial giants, it remains a tangible and visceral connection to Albany's past.